Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of On the Couch with Creatives. I say good morning because I'm here in the UK, but good afternoon or good evening if you're anywhere else in the world. I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Julie Hyde-Mew.
And this is On the Couch with Creatives. Fans and followers of the show will know that we're part of the Creatives Group, the private network for creative professionals across the globe. Together, we support you so that you can create at your best, connect with like-minded professionals, and therefore grow your creative business. If that sounds like a good idea to you and you'd like to join our fast-growing number of creative professionals, please get in touch with us after the show. But as I say, this is On the Couch with Creatives. So Julie, who do we have on the couch today?
Well, on the couch, we have someone who is regarded amongst the best African wildlife photographers and authors. DARYL Balfour. He has more than 3 decades of experience photographing wildlife in the field, not just in Africa, but in many places across the world. And he and his wife, Sharna, have more than a dozen best-selling coffee table books to their credit. They have contributed to many more as well. They are represented by several of the world's leading photo agencies, including Getty Images and the Image Bank, and their photographs are regularly published in such international publications as National Geographic, International Wildlife, and many, many more. They are DARYL and Sharna Balfour. Let's bring them on the couch. Hi, DARYL. Hi, Sharna.
Hi, goodness. I didn't realize that we were in the profession so many years.
Good to see you.
Yeah, well, that's what your bio says. And I was thinking how long ago it was since I met you. Now, I met the two of you when you were launching your coffee table book called Etosha. I think it was your 2nd or 3rd book. So how long ago was that?
Wow.
Well, yeah, that would have been 1990. So.
Whoa, yeah.
You've been in the field more than 30 years, Sharna, bashing around the bush.
We're feeling it.
Well, let's kick off with how it all started, because you both are such big names in the wildlife photographic world. Let's start with you, DARYL. You started off as a journalist and in PR, didn't you?
Yeah, I started off in newspapers way back in the 70s and moved my way up and became bureau chief of the Sunday Express before the Express closed down in the early 80s, at which stage I actually took a sabbatical and went sailing a yacht around the Indian Ocean for about 9 months. Came back, started a public relations business catering for the sailing and windsurfing business, and met Sharna during that period. We got married, and soon after we got married, she said, I'm not enjoying this life with you as a PR guy. You've always dreamed about living in the bush. Let's go and make memories. So we upped roots, sold everything, and moved up to Botswana.
Wow.
And then did you live in your vehicle, or what happened?
Well, we actually built a tented camp for ourselves to live in. We were very naive. We thought we'd just go there and find an island in the Okavango and put up some tents and live there. Well, the reality wasn't quite the same. So we actually ended up having to run a safari camp for a few years. Yeah, just over 2 years, we ran a safari camp. I turned my cameras away from windsurfers and surfers in the ocean to animals in the bush, and it's never stopped.
I've seen some of your images, which are absolutely beautiful. I love wildlife, and some of the images you have captured are just stunning. How patient do you have to be to get that perfect shot? Because anybody who's worked on, the David Attenborough, Blue Planet and all the big TV shows that come out, they take years and years and years to make, because of the photography and the filmography just takes so long to get that perfect shot. Because obviously animals, you can't direct them, can you? You've got to wait for that perfect moment. How long does it take you?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head there, Melanie, because patience is probably the most important thing for anybody aspiring to be a wildlife photographer. If you don't have patience, as you said, those Attenborough films, some of them take years and years to get the footage that they do. Everybody sits down and watches a 45-minute segment on TV, and I think that's what the real world is like out there. But we were actually watching an Attenborough documentary last night and just saying, wow, how many years did they take to get that? Because we've been at, as Julie said, more than 30 years. And a lot of that stuff we haven't seen. And we're out there 9-10 months every year.
One of the things that we do tell people when they're on safari with us is that you have to have a lot of patience to get that shot. And that's one of the main things that we teach them when we're out on safari. It's just wait for the shot to happen. And then you get the reward at the end.
Yeah, and I'd imagine there's a certain amount of luck involved as well, because when that shot comes along, being in the right place at the right time probably has something to do with it as well.
Not only luck, I think having spent so many years in the bush, we have gotten to know the animals quite intimately now, and we can more or less predict what's going to happen. So we put people in the positions that they need to be in to get that lucky shot.
Yeah, patience, preparation, and a large part of preparation obviously is just researching and knowing your subject. I always say to people starting out in wildlife, I said, if you decided you wanted to be a wedding photographer, but you'd never attended a wedding before in your life, and you rocked up at the church with your cameras, you wouldn't have a clue of what you were going to be photographing. So you need to research, A, the animals you're hoping to photograph, B, the area that you're heading into. You need to know what you're likely to see, what you're likely to encounter, what the conditions are going to be. And then once you've got all of that knowledge, it's just patience and, yes, luck.
When I first met you, you were launching your coffee table book, Etosha. I think it was your second book, because I think your first was Rhino, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And we drove up from Windhoek. We flew to Windhoek. Now, do you remember this, Daryl and Sharna? We drove from Windhoek up to Etosha, and it's a straight, long road. And halfway there, there's this huge African market where you could pick up all sorts of mementos and trinkets and African stuff. And there were these huge, long giraffes carved in wood, which were becoming quite popular at the time. And Daryl insisted he wanted one of those giraffes. And we're talking about a giraffe that's almost right up to the ceiling. And everybody said, Daryl, we're coming back. Get it when we're on our way back. No, he wanted the giraffe. And he carried that giraffe all the way up in the van with about 12 of us in this van, kept it while we were in Etosha, put it back in the van. We traveled all the way back down this long road of hundreds of kilometers, past the marketplace again, got it to Windhoek, got it on the plane. We were all helping him carrying it on the plane. We got back to Joburg. We carried it off for him. We got into the arrivals hallway, and he stood it up, and somebody called his name, and he turned around and he knocked it over, and it went down like a tree and smashed in half. Do you remember that, Daryl?
I remember that very well, but I did repair it, and it stands on my veranda downstairs.
Oh, so you managed to repair it?
I managed to repair it. Yeah, just the head broke off. We glued it back on, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Oh, phew. After all that, my goodness me. I'd like to ask you about your filming of the animals, and you were saying about getting to know the animals and their behavioural patterns so that you can kind of predict what they're going to do. Do you get emotionally attached to any of the animals that you photograph, ones that have a really special place in your heart?
How can you not get attached to them?
I would be.
I mean, really, how many times have I been staring through the back of a camera, tears streaming down my face, and Daryl saying to me, for goodness sake, pull yourself together and get the shot. You do become, I mean, it's
Yeah, you do. strike up relationships, you give them names, and yeah, when you eventually finish a project and you have to leave, it's very sad. We typically, most of our books, we spend a minimum of a year in location. So in a year, you do get to know the individuals, particularly with the cats and the elephants. You get to know individual lions. You get to know how they're going to behave, how they're going to react. And yeah, when time comes to say goodbye, it's quite a sad moment.
Yeah, I would.
Especially if you're following, say a herd of wildebeest, say, because you spend a lot of time on the Masai Mara, don't you? And when you get to know, say, a particular family of zebra or something like that, and then one of them gets taken out by a lion, I mean, that must be quite shocking, because you can't interfere, can you?
No, you can't. I mean, obviously, with wildebeest, you're not going to know individuals because there's 1.5.
That was the wrong example.
But even with the wildebeest, when they're doing a river crossing, it's such an emotional thing. And when you see the little babies that have lost their mothers, it pulls at your heartstrings when they're running around calling and calling. And you know, there's no chance that that little individual is going to last the night. Something is going to eat it for dinner. And it does pull at your heartstrings, definitely.
Yeah, it's, often we're watching a river crossing in the Masai Mara with the wildebeest, and there'll be other cars, other vehicles lined up on the bank watching, and you'll see a crocodile moving in, and there's like a collective gasp from everybody and all of the vehicles watching. It's like watching a tennis match at Wimbledon or a big rugby match in the stadium, and there's audience participation, and people react, and you'll get a wildebeest perhaps getting grabbed by a crocodile, and then there's this titanic struggle as the wildebeest drags the crocodile and gets its footing, and then manages to shake the croc off. And shame, crocodiles need to eat as well, but it's quite funny and very emotional, because you eventually see this wildebeest shake off the crocodile and stagger up the bank out of the water, and there's a loud cheer from everybody on the bank watching. It's very amusing at times.
Yeah,
I feel for the crocodile.
But a lot of the time, you're not in areas like, obviously, areas like the Masai Mara, Kruger National Park in South Africa. You get a lot of tourists, and obviously there are times when it's not just you there taking photographs. But you've also gone to really remote places like Alaska to film the polar bears, and America to film the grizzlies. And how do you feel when you're absolutely alone in the middle of nowhere and you've got something like a grizzly bear or a polar bear staring at you?
Yeah, that's the ultimate. That's what we become wildlife photographers for, to experience those true and ultimate wildernesses. And you mentioned Alaska. Alaska. We in Africa think that we have wilderness. We have nothing compared with what Alaska's like. I mean, the size of Alaska and the bear. There's less than 1 million people who live there all year round, and the whole of southern Africa, from, if you drew a line across the top of Angola, over Zambia and everything, all of that below that line to the tip of Cape Point would fit into Alaska, and there's less than 1 million people there. So when you're out in that wilderness and you're alone on foot, and you've got a dozen grizzly bears on the hillside around you, or in the streams and creeks catching salmon, it's just amazing.
There's nothing that can make you feel more alive and one with nature than being there, and those animals are running straight towards you, and you just think, stand still, don't run. It's something that everyone should experience.
It's pretty frightening, though, because, as you know, I spent quite a few years filming for television in the bush, and people don't believe me when I say, even when a lion charges you, you have to stand still. You're never going to outrun them. So I know what it's like to have a lion charging me and come to it a grinding halt about a meter from me, turn around and walk away. Do grizzlies behave in the same way?
Yes, they do. But you need to understand that when we're there during the salmon run, the grizzlies are feeding, they're gorging themselves on salmon that are migrating up the rivers in their millions, in fact. I mean, last year there were 51 million salmon that went back to the spawning grounds. So the salmon are not interested in humans. And we'll get into position sort of on one side of a stream with the salmon passing between us and the grizzly bear. And then the grizzly bears come charging straight into the river, almost straight at you. But you know that they're running for the salmon that are directly in front of you. And you know, we'll lie down at the water's edge, and the salmon are passing 2-3 yards, 2-3 meters in front of us, and the bears come rushing from 20-30 yards away, and come flying through the air and crash down into the water, splash water all over you, but they emerge with a bright red salmon in their mouths. So yeah, it's a bit unnerving the first time it happens, and the first time you encounter a grizzly bear. I mean, it's the most dangerous animal in North America, so the legend goes. And yeah, I mean, the size of their claws, they could rip you to shreds if they wanted to. But they are very picky feeders.
Yeah, but I just want to add here that nowadays when we're traveling, we've always got people with us, clients with us. And we would never put people in a dangerous position. As I said before, we've got to know these animals and can read their behavior. So even though they are charging towards us, initially, we would sort of put our hand on a client's shoulder and say, don't move, just sit, take your photographs. So you're teaching them and talking them through it. I mean, it is quite a frightening thing for people when they have these animals chasing towards them the first time. You can just imagine. Your instinct is to get up and run. So we just quietly put our hands on their shoulder and say, sit still, don't move. And eventually they settle down as well. And wow, the amazing shots one can get. It's just so exciting.
I think I would be terrified about, you know, having something charging towards me across the river. It's like if it overshot and skidded and sort of landed on you, you would just be flat as pancake, wouldn't you? Be like, no, stop. I think that would take quite a lot of nerve to just making sure that they, you know, stop when they're supposed to.
Yeah, hold that nerve. Just hold it.
You do have to hold your nerve. Yeah, but as Sharna says, you know, it's all about just knowing your subject and experience. Yeah, we've been doing this for more than 30 years. We've been to Alaska a dozen times or more. And every year we go and we sit with grizzly bears. We often see some of the same individuals year after year. So you get to know the characters. You know, some of them will kind of snarl at you the first time you get a bit too close, but then they'll say, "Oh, it's you," and yeah, so we just settle down and they settle down and they go about eating salmon.
Now you talk about clients. You've always mixed your own photographic work with taking people on safari with you, haven't you?
No, not always. 17 years, Daryl and I lived in the bush together by ourselves, taking those coffee table book photographs and writing them. And when did we start this seriously?
Basically around about the early 2000s, pretty much when digital photography came to the fore. The whole genre of professional wildlife photography kind of went into decline because autofocus cameras, digital cameras made photography so much easier for everybody out there. And the ability to make an income purely out of wildlife photography in particular just crashed. There are very, very few. In fact, I can't think of any top professional photographers in the world today, even National Geographic, BBC photographers who don't supplement the income by taking people on tours and conducting workshops. You know, photography has become so much more accessible to everybody with autofocus, auto everything in the cameras, and now artificial intelligence coming into it as well. So, you know, just taking photographs for a living in the wildlife, sure, a wedding or sports photographer is different, but taking wildlife and selling the pictures has become very difficult. So, yeah, conducting workshops, teaching people how to use their new equipment and taking them to amazing places.
So what kind of places have you been to? We've talked about South Africa, Kenya, the Masai Mara, Alaska. What other places do you take groups of people?
Well, I mean, we go pretty much anywhere in the world where people want to go, anywhere that's special. But Alaska comes up in the grizzly bears in Alaska is in a few weeks' time. After that, it's Mana Pools in Zimbabwe. After that, it's back to South America, to the Pantanal to photograph jaguars. I've got over 3 weeks there with guests from around the world. And then from Brazil, it's down to Chile for mountain lions, pumas, cougars, whatever you want to call them. And then back here, and then our other passion, or my other passion, is wine. So I come back here and then I take people on a wine tasting tour in the Cape.
Oh, man after my own heart. I think that sounds like, I think I'll come and learn how to photograph animals, and then we can drink wine afterwards. That sounds like the perfect kind of scenario to me. Do you have a favorite place that's special to you that you really love to photograph in certain areas? Above all else, yeah, if I could really just end my days here, this is what I would love, or a particular animal that you really feel passionate about.
We go back to Kenya over and over.
Yeah.
Oh, there's just so much diversity there and different animals. Never get tired of going there. And a special animal, elephants. We love elephants.
Yeah, lovely.
Well, now I think we need to mention, and stop me if you don't want to talk about it, now we need to mention the incident which happened a few months after I actually met you, Daryl and Sharna, when an elephant nearly killed you.
Yeah, that was, again, pushing the boundaries back in the days of being young and enthusiastic about things. And we were working on an elephant book in Kruger Park, and there was one particular big bull that was known as Chokwan, that he was actually the last of the big Kruger bulls that I needed to find and photograph. And Sharna and I went out early one morning. We'd been told it was in a specific area in Kruger. We were working with permission to go off-road, to walk, to get out of our vehicles and walk in the park, obviously where tourists couldn't see us. And we spotted this elephant off in the bush. I took the camera. Sharna stayed behind because she'd actually broken her glasses 2 days before, so I didn't want to stumble around the bush not being able to see. And I walked in, found this elephant. He was busy feeding, set up the cameras, and made a little noise, tapped my wedding ring on the tripod to attract his attention, at which he spun around and charged straight at me. And that was kind of normal behavior for these guys. He got startled when I made a noise. He charged at me, but it was what we all refer to, those who know elephants, as a mock charge. He was standing tall, making himself look as big as possible, kicking up lots of dust, flapping his ears. And they charged. I just carried on taking photographs, knowing that this was a mock charge and that he would stop. And yeah, fortunately he did. He stopped about 5-6 yards away from me. I took a few more shots, and then I clapped my hands to say, okay, off you go now. Go back to what you were doing before. And he turned around and ambled off into the bush. So I then picked up my cameras. I was walking back to where I'd left Sharna in the vehicle. And I looked back and I thought, hang on, let me just go back and finish off this roll of film. This was back in December 1992. So it was still in the days of shooting film and having rolls of 36 in the camera, not like today's cameras where you can shoot thousands. So I thought, I'll just finish off this roll of film, take a few more shots of him just feeding instead of just the charging shots. Walk back, and I could see he was aware of me. He was watching me coming. And I stopped about 40 meters away, sat down on the ground at the tripod at its lowest level. And as I sat down, this elephant turned around and charged at me. And I immediately saw that his disposition was different. And I said to myself, I said, this is for real. And he stopped about 15, 18 yards away from me. And then this let out a really loud screaming, trumpeting sound, put his head down, curled his trunk up under his chest, folded his ears back, and came at me. And I'm a photographer, so I was, in one side of my brain was saying, fantastic shots. And the other side was saying, this is for real, get out of here. And it doesn't take a charging elephant very long to cover 15 or 20 yards. So before I knew it, he was on top of me. I scrambled to my feet. He hit me on my back and knocked me flying. And I actually thought, well, that's all he's going to do. You know, I've often seen elephants flick a trunk out at a warthog at a water hole, or a buffalo that gets too close, and they just kind of shoo them off. And I thought, well, that's all he's going to do. But no sooner had I thought that, and it was on top of me, it was kicking, and there were these massive legs. So I thought, I did a little bit of boxing in my youth, and I thought I would do what boxers do when they get into trouble. I'd clinch. So I threw my arms around one of these massive legs and sort of clung on for dear life. And I think that kind of startled the elephant, because he just stopped. Everything went dead quiet, and he reached down with his trunk, grabbed me around the ankle on my right leg, and just kind of pulled me out from underneath him, raised me up over his head, and then smashed me into the ground by holding me by my ankle. And that, of course, dislocated my right hip, which anybody who's experienced an injury like that will know you're not moving anywhere after that. So I lay there in agony, and I looked up, and he came at me again with his tusk. His tusk was coming straight at my face, and I pulled my head aside. He hit me a glancing blow on my skull, fractured my skull, and knocked me unconscious. And that was the last I knew of that. Until I regained consciousness about 45 minutes later, and managed to call to Sharna. The South African National Parks insisted, when they gave me permission to walk there, insisted I carry a firearm. So I had a revolver on my side, which the elephant had actually pulled everything off. And I could see it lying in the dirt. So I dragged myself across to this revolver and fired three shots into the air, which is kind of a universal distress signal. Sharna came in and found me.
Did the elephant amble off? Did he think you were dead?
I think so. You know, that's what I like to think, that maybe he realized he'd overreacted and just wandered off. But it's probable that he thought I was dead, because I was unconscious. I wasn't moving. He kind of kicked me around. There were signs, there were big gouge marks in the ground around where my body had been lying, where he'd tried to kneel down, because typically what an elephant does with its victims is it goes down his knees and it uses the top of its trunk, sort of the bridge of its nose, so to speak, to grind and crush the victim into the ground. And because this elephant's tusks were so long, its tusks were sort of 6, 7, 8 feet long, he couldn't get down on his knees. It kind of acted like a tripod. Every time he tried to kneel, his tusks got stuck on the ground and held him up. So he wasn't able to finish me off like that. And he either got bored because I wasn't reacting, or he just thought, well, he's done the deed, and he wandered off. So when Sharna came to find me, he wasn't anywhere in sight.
Can you pick up the story, Sharna? Because I know that what you did was so heroic.
I just dealt with the situation, really. Yeah, when I found Daryl, when I heard the gunshots, I knew that he had been trampled, and I just thought, oh, well, at least he's alive. I knew he was alive. And I just want to say that in all the time we were photographing elephants, I mean, we had 100 mock charges. And our rule of thumb was never, ever go back to an elephant that's mock charged you. And he went back. And we've never done it again since. Yeah. But I drove in to where I heard gunshots come from and found Daryl. Daryl, oh gosh, he was like a bloody mess from top to bottom. When the elephant had really kicked him around, he was scratched everywhere. He was full of mud. And I knew I had to get him to hospital soon. I couldn't leave him there because there were hyenas in the area, and I knew if I'd left him there and went for help, that they would have come and eaten him. So I had to make a plan to pick him up and put him into the Land Rover. Lucky for us, we had our pellicate cases in the back of the vehicle, and I made like steps, so I could pick him up, put him on the one case, pick him up, put him on the other case. And because he was conscious, he could use his arms and just help me pull him into the back of the Landy. We always carried a mattress with us wherever we went, because we never knew if we were going to go back to camp for the night or spend the night out in the field with a subject we were photographing. So we did have a mattress in the back. So I put him on that, and then we rushed through to Skukuza. I remembered when we got to Skukuza that there was a doctor in camp.
How long did it take you, though? It took you hours to get back to Skukuza, didn't it?
No, about an hour, just over an hour and a half. Yeah. I took him to the doctor, and the doctor went into full panic mode when I brought him in. He was trying to put a drip into Daryl. He told me, oh, he's only got 20 minutes to live. We've got to get him to the doctor. He's going to die any minute. And he was shaking like anything and saying to me, put the drip in his arm, put the drip in his arm. And I was like, just pull yourself together. I'm going to go and get a helicopter now.
Yeah, the doctor went into panic. He was shaking and telling Sharna he's going to go into shock and die. And I was conscious then, and I knew I was in a lot of pain. I knew what my injuries were, but I knew I wasn't dying. And I was saying to him, yeah, and listening to Sharna was saying, pull yourself together. And I said, listen, doc, I'm not going to die. I'm in a lot of pain. Give me something for the pain. And, I need to get to hospital.
Lucky for us, the helicopter was in Skukuza at the time. So I phoned the warden and told them what had happened. They sent the helicopter. Daryl and the doctor got in the helicopter and left me behind. And of course, word got out that this guy had been trampled by the elephant. So all the rangers in the area came to come and see what was going on. And as they were flying away, I just heard all these guys saying, oh, well, we'll never see him alive again. And I just turned and looked at them and I said, really, guys, thanks a lot. Anyway, I had to go and give a full report to the warden before I was allowed to leave the park. And remember, Daryl said that I had broken my glasses. Nobody offered to drive me to Skukuza or with me to Skukuza.
Nelspruit.
To Nelspruit at that time, where the hospital was. And so I had to drive, what was it, 3 hours? Barely being able to see, kind of drive as fast as I could, wondering if I would ever see him again, alive again. But he made it, pulled it through. Strong, tough guy, this.
As the old saying goes, only the good die young.
You were in hospital for many months after that, Daryl.
Actually, I wasn't. I was off my feet recuperating for several months. But the doctor that initially treated me made a mistake and discharged me after 5 days and told me to go home and get over it. And I knew that he was wrong and that I needed to be in traction with a dislocated hip. So I went home and spoke to, the home was then in Swaziland, where Sharna's parents were farming. So I went home there, spoke to the local GP, and he did some research, phoned around, and came back and said, yes, you're right, you need to be in traction. So my father-in-law rigged up pulleys and weights and everything at home in Swaziland, and I went back into traction for 6 weeks there. But it was 4 months before I was back on my feet and went back to Kruger. And we actually went back to try to find the same elephant again. I was desperate to see him and let him see me. And elephants never forget, they say. And I was kind of hoping that he would raise his trunk in some kind of gesture of reconciliation and say, sorry, I overreacted last time.
Or finish you off. Oh, I thought I'd left you for dead. Let me finish you off.
That was the other alternative. But fortunately or unfortunately, we never saw him again. And he was killed fighting with Nut Elephant not too long after that.
Well, maybe it's a blessing, as you say. He may have been a bit like a Bond villain baddie. You have a nasty habit of surviving, Daryl.
Mr. Balfour.
Yeah, Mr. Balfour, you have a nasty habit of surviving, so maybe it's just as well. But my goodness, I think that's an incredible story, and incredibly brave as well. For that might have finished most people thinking, oh, I can't do this anymore. But to get back out there and carry on doing what you love, you obviously have such a great passion for what you do that a near-death experience isn't going to stop you.
Yeah, what happens when people fall off a horse? You got to get back on the horse. And I think, there are risks in any profession, any pastime, anything we do in life. And, if you let things scare you off doing things, you're never going to live life to the full.
Yeah. But also, one has to work at your fears. I mean, afterwards, we went to a place in Zimbabwe called Mana Pools, where you can walk with the animals. And we spent a month there going out every day on foot with the elephants and just working and getting our nerve back again. So it takes a bit of time, but this is what we wanted to do in our life. And yes, we worked at it and we're back at it. And we have bears chasing us. We have elephants chasing us. We have lions chasing us. I mean, it's just, that's our life.
Has it ever happened again to either of you or both of you where you were in such a dangerous position? Every day?
Should we say things like this?
No.
So have you ever landed up in hospital again from something like that elephant attack?
No,
never with anything. Never an animal injury. So we don't try to put ourselves at risk. And as Sharna said, when an elephant has mock charged you, basically he said, "Listen, I'm not happy with you being here. Just get out of my space." And foolishly, I think it was a sense of elation because, as I said, Chokwan was the last of the big tuskers, the Magnificent Seven, they were known as. And he was the last of the big guys that we had to photograph in our project in Kruger. And some of the other elephants had taken me months to locate. And the first morning we went out to find Chokwan after getting a tip off as to where he was. We found him. And sort of half an hour after spotting him, I had the shots. And it was basically, well, this project is now over. So when I was walking back to the car to fetch Sharna, because she had actually said, if it is Chokwan, please come back and fetch me, because I do want to see him as well. And I just looked back and I thought, wow, let me just get a few more shots to finish this off. The only pictures I had of him was the charging shots. So I thought, let me just get some shots of him just being a nice elephant. And well, we know how that turned out.
Did your
Just as well,
survive?
really, because if you had got Sharna over, he probably would have smashed both of you to smithereens.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what we always say. I always say it wasn't his time, because I did break my glasses and I didn't want to stumble around not being able to see. And if I had been there, there's no ways I would have just stood and watched. I would have tried to draw that elephant's attention towards me. We both would have got trampled without a doubt.
Yeah. And then the hyenas would have got us.
Yeah.
Did your photographs of him survive, or was your camera trampled and your equipment trampled in the attack?
Yeah, a few of the shots did. I actually had two cameras with me. And the elephant actually squashed and trampled and stood on and kicked around both of the cameras. They were, as the factory in Japan reported when the cameras were sent by Nikon South Africa to Nikon in Japan, they responded, these cameras heavy-handled, not repairable.
But we did get the film out, yes.
But they were able to get the film out without any damage to the film. So we did get the final shots.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
And that did land up in the book, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That last shot you took before he picked you up and swung you and stashed you.
Before I turned to get out of there, that's in the book. And it's actually on the cover of another book by another artist and researcher called Big Tuskers of Africa. They used one of those pictures on the cover of that book.
So what would your top tips be for anybody listening to this and anybody who has had a burning desire to photograph wild animals? What would you say to them, having had this experience? What advice would you give to anybody wanting to try and make it in this kind of arena?
I'd say don't do it.
Stay away.
No, quite seriously, as I said earlier, it has become extremely difficult. In fact, it's become almost impossible to make a living out of wildlife photography unless you are prepared to take people on trips with you, conduct workshops, give them tuition in the field. So, we were quite lucky in that we did have a guiding background, having run a camp in Botswana before we became professional photographers. And a lot of top photographers who are running trips today have similar backgrounds. But if you want to make a living out of photography, go and shoot weddings or products or something like that. You're honestly and genuinely not going to make enough to pay the bills or buy the grocery out of wildlife photography. But it's a fantastic hobby. It's a fantastic pastime, and it can take you to amazing parts of the world and see fantastic things. So yes, certainly take up photography, but have a profession that's going to pay the bills and buy the equipment and pay your airfares and take you to these magical places.
And always know your subject, especially if you've got your clients with you. Know that subject.
Yeah.
Predict what's going to happen so that you can get the shots for them. That's 90% of being on safari, is that your clients are happy with the photographs that they're getting. and the experiences that they are sharing with you.
And how do people get in touch with you if they've, so, oh, this sounds wonderful, I'd like to go and learn photography or come on tour with you guys, or even sup your wine at the end? How can people follow you and get in touch with you if they want to?
Well, you know, we are on all the social media channels. We're on Instagram. They can follow me on Instagram at Daryl Balfour Wild Photos. I'm on Twitter as Daryl Balfour. I'm on the new opposition to Twitter app launched by Zuckerberg called Threads, also as Daryl Balfour Wild Photos. And we have a website, wildphotossafaris.com, which I'm embarrassed to say isn't always totally up to date, but it does give an indication of the kind of trips that we're offering all over the world. And yeah.
How big are the groups that you take? For argument's sake, if you're going to see the gorillas, how big are the groups? Or if you're going to go to Asia and see tigers in the wild, do you limit yourself to the numbers?
Yes, we definitely keep very small groups. Our private camp in the Masai Mara, we only have 8 people. It's our private tented camp. It's a seasonal camp that we put up for the migration season or for a big cat season early in the year. We have 8 people in that camp. Tigers in India, we take a maximum of 6 guests. The jaguars in the Pantanal, also a maximum of 6 guests. When I go to the grizzly bears, we can accommodate up to 10 people there because we operate with float planes there. And obviously, the more people filling the seats in float planes, the lower the costs become if you share it amongst 10 people rather than 5 or 6. So yeah, it's small groups so that we can have intimate interactions with the guests and give them personal attention.
We never squash people into vehicles. We will put few people in vehicles, and then Daryl and I will be in a separate vehicle so that you have got one of us with you. And then we will change the people that are with us the next day. So you get the experience of both of us on every safari.
Can you talk, as a top tip, can you talk about the patience that is needed for wildlife photography?
Yeah, we drum that into people all the time. They'll sit there and they'll say, well, why are we sitting here? I said, well, we're sitting here because those cheetahs that are lying in the shade under the bush over there are hungry. We can see that their stomachs are not full. And we're going to sit here, we're going to just maintain our distance and watch them, because if you look over there in the distance, you'll see there's a few Thompson's gazelles. And just now, those cheetahs are going to get up and they're going to make their approach, and they're going to go and hunt those Thompson's gazelles. And that's why we're sitting here and waiting. And it might take you 2 or 3 hours of sitting waiting patiently, but eventually you get that action, and you get amazing experiences. And it's the same with all animals. You know, you've got to understand the animal. You've got to know what they're likely to do. You've got to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, and then have the patience just to wait for that to happen.
And I imagine with the being patient and still and calm, it kind of allows you to meld into the scenery, if you like, so that what is around you is kind of adapting to your presence. You know, animals aren't stupid, and they know when something's not there that is there that maybe shouldn't be there. You know, they all have very great sense of, keen sense of smell and other senses. So if you're quiet and you're melting into the scenery kind of thing, you're more likely to get a good shot rather than if you're trying to manipulate the scene.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to blend in. It's important not to make loud noises or wear brightly colored clothing. You just want to be insignificant. And fairly recently, with the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, the term became quite popularized, that photographers and journalists became embedded in the military units. And, you know, wildlife photographers have been embedded in the wilderness for a long time, but before it became common for journalists and news photographers to become embedded. So yeah, you embed yourself in the environment, and that's why, you know, all the books that Sharna and I did, we spent a minimum of a year in an area. Tasha, we spent a year. Chobe, we spent a year, and you know, you want to be there. You want to experience the hot, the cold, the wet, the dry, the dust, and then you get to know the animals. You get to know everything.
Fabulous. Well, on that note, we are now going to delve into your psyche a little bit, both of you, and we're going to play our values jam game. And what we're going to do is I'm going to run my finger along the cards. You're going to say stop, and we're going to talk about the value on that card, so our audience know you a bit better. Stop. Did you say stop?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, we have got, what did we have? Oh, this is quite a good one, actually, for what we have been talking about and for the career choice that we have been discussing. This is a value of humility. Okay. Humility. So I'm going to ask you creatively, because we're creatives here. What does humility mean to you? What does it look, feel, and sound like?
Well, I mean,
when you're in this vast wilderness and you're this tiny little speck amongst nature, and you realize how small we are in this vast world we live in, especially in places like Alaska or the Antarctic, or you've got this scenery around you. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think wildlife photography, or just being out in the wilderness, teaches you how insignificant we really are. But on the other hand, we do need to understand that we're not having an insignificant effect on the environment. I mean, what mankind is doing to planet Earth is quite horrendous. And as I said to somebody just yesterday, in fact, you know, man is the only truly destroyer species on this planet, and it's a very sad indictment of our kind that if humans were to become extinct tomorrow, the planet would be in a better place. And I don't think you can say that about any other species on this planet.
Yeah. No, I agree, and it's something that I've thought about a lot. And just Sharna, what you were saying is, when I went to Africa for the first time with Julie in 2009, I think it's quite a long time ago now, and that feeling out in the bush, you know, of the vast expanse, you feel so tiny, and I think everybody should experience that. You know, some of these big horrible corporate fat cat people should actually experience that soul-touching peace and realize what is important. You know, it's not the money, it's not the greed, but getting back in and letting nature touch your soul, I think, is really, really important, because you don't look at things the same way. And I always said to Julie that I left part of my soul in Africa when I came away.
Everybody does.
I would love to come back. And I think that experience, and I'm guessing the experience that you provide for people does that. It touches the very soul, and you don't think of things the same way. And I would love to get some of these people out of the city and out of their little boxes to say, oh yes, we'll do this, and not really understanding what the consequences will be, and actually come and spend some time in the bush, in the jungle, in Alaska, with raw nature, and see what's important. Find out what really is important.
So knowing that, and knowing how humble you can be in such a vast scenario, what does humility smell like to you?
Is there a prize for getting this right?
Elephant poo.
Rain hitting the earth.
Yeah,
This watching nature
yeah,
at its raw intimacy.
yeah. The smells, yeah, the smells of nature. I think, as Sharna says, rain on dry, parched earth at the beginning of a season. Whether that is a smell of humility, I'm not sure, but yeah.
I like that because it does, it brings it back, doesn't it, when the land is dry and the gift of God or whatever you want to call it, and the rain comes down and then brings new life. It does, it puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It really, really does.
It does.
And on that note, I'd just like to thank both of you for joining us on the couch today. It's been wonderful to see both of you after 30 odd years, and it's been wonderful talking to you.
Oh, it really has. It has. Oh, it's just been amazing. I could talk to you all day. I could just carry on, but we do have to stop. But thank you so much for joining us on the couch today and giving us your time. It's been absolutely spectacular. And thank you to our audience for tuning in as well. But that's all we've got time for today. So until next time, we'll see you.